I wrote this book called Stealing Flowers from the Neighbors. So this book is a part elegy, part love letter. Um, Part of this is for in memory of my mother. So my mother, Kay Levine, was a masterful painter. In fact, her paintings tonight are in an art gallery. Um, she was an amazing mother and best friend. So my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and this was our experience together. It's called Swimming in the Rain. With my hands on her still strong shoulders, I steer my mother to the discount rack so she won't complain about the prices. The sales girl comes over wearing an Oregon Ducks t-shirt, her smartphone squeezed into the back pocket of her rhinestone jeans. Cracking her gum, she asked my mother in slow motion, "Can I help you?" My mother is slow as rain, a creaky, twisted bicycle chain. Back at the car, she lifts the black bathing suit and folds it neatly on her lap. "I look like a fat seal in that thing," she says, and I tell her, "and I'm a seagull crashing into the surf." It's been raining for hours, both of us swimming now in uncharted waters. Rummaging. Off the bus, my mother struts in front of me in a rush to the bank. She waves her finger at the teller, counting bills behind the window. "Where's the chubby one?" she says. I stand behind her and tug her arm. "Stop it," she says. She rummages through her black leather fanny pack for her driver's license. I know she won't find it. "They know me here," she yells. Behind the window, the manager nods to me. He says to her, "It's okay, Mrs. Levine." I turn around and face the security guard, the taser on his belt. He doesn't flinch. Has she done this before? I feel sweat under my down jacket and winter hat. Everything is red and hot, like the inside of a mouth screaming. Unleashed. Since my mother died, I haven't been able to read. The words on the page blur like a child blowing ink through a straw. The image, a black splotch with branches of tiny arms, hands, and feet. My mother used to teach me art on our back porch, a can of turpentine, scattered tubes of thick paint, dirty rags, brushes in a pickle jar. Open window, a curtain shift, a clothesline of pinned white cotton sheets. I used to watch her tan tennis arms press and pull along our damp clothes. Steam sounded like a sighing dog waiting to be unleashed. This next poem is about my mother, and in our family, we always had a good senses of humor. It's called "When I Wouldn't Eat My Disgusting Liver." When I wouldn't eat my disgusting liver, my mother said I should be grateful. Children are starving in Africa, she'd say, dumping more ketchup on my plate. When I was sick and wanted broth, my mother told me it could be worse. I might be dying of diphtheria. You should be grateful you have your health. When my husband left, she said she never really liked him, that he was way too young for me. I watched her pull back her wrinkles, sighing into the rear view mirror. Look, you should be grateful that you are still young and pretty. I remember when you were a little girl, you used to dance in front of the stove. You looked so happy. When I started losing my looks, she said, be grateful. At least you have your legs. Recently, I lost my job. Well, a slap in the face, she said. Well, at least you have your teeth, she said, pointing to her implants. These cost a fortune. Okay. So this is going back in time to my childhood, obviously. This is called Astral Body. Before my mother woke up, before scrambled eggs and mandel bread, before Soul Train boogied on the TV, before cats fought with chickens on the fire escape, before dirty diesel wafted from streets below, before Count Basie and Ellington, Mr. Cavalier's whiskered fell into the sink, before a slap on the wrist or on the behind, before clouds shrouded the sky, turning everything into a permanent gray, when white stripes broke the blue skies in twos or fours. Soon my mother would shout from the shower, "Get to the kitchen now." I drag my chair close to the stove and count 29 bubbles of her avocado coffee pot. I was mesmerized by the starburst design on its front, how its silver rays cast light into the sky, my astral body rising like steam. Lilacs. Today, I don't have to be kind. I don't have to return your phone calls, shower, comb my hair. When you ask, yes, she is still dying. In a quiet room, blanketed by light, a bouquet of lilacs drooped next to a bruised banana, glass of mango juice, vanilla ice cream dripping from a spoon. Smell, I gently tousle petals to her nose. She shakes her head, turns away. Her breath now slow and strained, each kiss a whisper, a tiny puff of air. Her mottled, frigid skin wafts metallic. Eyes glassy and blue-green stare at my nose. How did you get that bump on your face? Her knotted fingers peruse its shape. I lift the mask to kiss and kiss the part of her face I hope she can still feel. I stroke her moist hair. I am here, Mom. I am here. Okay, this is stealing flowers from the neighbors. I didn't get arrested or anything. Um, Stealing flowers from the neighbors. No dark sunglasses, no hood over my head, no, no scissors, shopping bag slung over my shoulder. I slide behind bushes, pricked by brambles, yank and snap, rip and tear. No worry or rush or hush from the birds. Squirrels, too busy collecting nuts, don't stop on the lawn to judge. Dandelion seeds fill the air like dust. A silent sneeze, a cough caught in my throat. I crawl under towering weeds and hedges, wedge myself between rocks and prickly thorns. I do not feel the scraping of my knees or the bee sting, burn of the sun on my cheeks, heat on my hatless head. Stealing flowers from the neighbors, I can only think of you in your hospice bed, your weary head waiting for me to appear. It was a really beautiful bouquet. I have a picture of it somewhere. Okay. I have two more. It's about mostly what I can read about my mom, and then I just start crying. So this is after she passed, and I had to clean out her her condo and everything. You know, if you've lost anybody, you know what a really big deal that is. This is called darning. Cleaning out my mother's dresser, I find a pair of brown wool socks. She had stitched the toes, zigzag, loops protruding, and threads sticking out, like the little hairs that wouldn't fit into the ponytail my mother tried to tie. I picture her rummaging through her sewing kit, searching for a brown spool. Spinning on the kitchen stool, I watch her stiffen the limp thread with spit, pinch it with nimble fingers, squinting as if she were painting a wheat field or placid lake. She holds her brush steady, level to a horizon of trees. The red socks they give my mother in the hospital are dotted with little white hearts and treaded sole paw prints. We shuffle past the nursing station. The IV pole drags behind us. Gripping my arm, she waves, smiling at the nurse she just yelled at in the bathroom. She brushes silver hair away from her tired face and squeezes my hand. We move from room to room as if we were floating down the hall, past the nursing station, lunch carts, breathing machines, past the beeping noises of codes. A sudden breeze lifts her blue gown, and we float higher and higher, much further than the moon. And I'm going to close this reading with I think it's a love poem. I think after I wrote this, I was done with my book. I really spent. This is called One Life. I am a ram without a horn without a mouthpiece without a king without commandments without a mountaintop. I am a mountaintop without towering trees, a myrtle without birds. Without birds, I am silence. Silently, your voice echoes my name. You are the rain covering the desert plain. Droplet by droplet, you fall on everything. Thank you very much.
Hear us read tonight. I'm going to be reading 10 poems from my new chapbook. It's entitled Ubasute. And this book is about my parents, and it touches on their experiences of World War II, of being newlyweds, being parents, settling in suburbia, and finally growing old and dying. My father passed away in 2011 and my mother in 2015. And I wrote these poems as a way to keep them alive in my life, and also as a way to continue honoring them. The title Ubasute is a Japanese word which literally means abandoned. And it refers to this mythical practice from Japanese folklore where a grown son carries his aged parent on his back to a mountain and abandons them, leaves them there to die. And I was just a boy when my mother told me this horrible tale, and it's the subject of the first poem I'm going to read for you. It's the first poem in the book, and it's a short poem. It's an ekphrastic poem, and it's based on, I don't know if you could see that, it's inspired by this woodblock print by the master Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. The title of the print and the title of my poem is The Moon of Ubasute. You know, in writing this poem, I was wondering if there would be any reason why somebody who is old and dying would actually want this, or at least think this was the best way to go. You know, when my mother told me about this tale, she presented it in a way that suggested this is just the way it is, and this was my duty as the son to do it. She was probably totally joking, but I didn't know. I was a little kid. So I remember thinking how terrible and sad this was. So this poem is in the voice of the mother. And I believe that she is speaking to to a little boy, that little boy, me. The Moon of Ubasute, after the Woodblock by Tsukioka Yoshitoshi. Years from now, When I am old, blind, and crippled, his mother said, you must carry me up the slope of Tanigawa, past the ancient knotted pine. Leave me in a cradle of hakone grass and moss. Without pity, my son, the moon will watch as I reach for my mother, Okasan, Okasan. The ginkgos will bow, weep their leaves, bury me in gold. My next poem is a pantoum, and it's entitled Burial. I returned my father's body to the earth, cremated as he instructed in a letter. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. Those who needed to know were told. I had his remains cremated as he instructed, scattered his ashes in Bodega Bay. Those who needed to know were told that I waited until my mother passed to scatter his ashes in Bodega Bay, past the jetty where we used to fish. I waited until my mother passed, poured out their dust together, past the jetty where we used to fish, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. I poured out their dust together with a handful of Uncle George, from the deck of the Miss Anita, seagulls calling overhead. No funeral, no obituary in the newspaper. With a handful of Uncle George, I returned their bodies to the earth. So it's true. My father wrote my sister and me a letter asking us not to have a funeral or put an obituary in the newspaper. And then later, my mother, years later, asked the same thing of us. So we honored their wishes. But something about that bothered me. Without an online obituary, who would know in the future they ever existed? So I went to work. I started writing some poems with the intention, of getting them published in print and online. So my little strategy was to, on one hand, honor their wishes as a dutiful son, but at the same time, make it possible for people to know that they existed and the impact that they had on our lives. My next poem is about my father, and it's entitled Hand Tilling. And in this poem, I refer to Executive Order 9066, and you all probably remember that that's the executive order that Franklin Roosevelt signed into action, which led the way during World War II for many Japanese Americans up and down the West Coast to be incarcerated, put in internment camps. Also, I'd like to mention, I use this word that I didn't know before I wrote this poem. It's the word gnomon. It's spelled Gnomon, gnomon. And you all know what a sundial is, right? Many people put the decorative sundials in their gardens. Well, the gnomon is that needle that stands upright on the sundial. So when the sun crosses the sky, it casts a shadow off the gnomon so you could tell the time. This poem is entitled Hand Tilling. He chuffs his shovel into soil with the sole of his right boot, more dried mud than leather. He balances full weight, both feet on the shoulders of the shovel. Gloved hands rocking the handle, blade prying packed clay. He levers a clod, turns it, hacks it, repeats down an 8-foot row to his right. The smell of earth takes him back to San Gabriel, the family farm of rented acreage. before the war, before Executive Order 9066, eviction, incarceration. After tilling 4 beds, he plants the shovel upright, like a gnomon marking time, rests on the pine bench under the pin oak. He takes a swig from a can of Coors, surveys his garden, never needs to look beyond his fence. My next poem is based on probably my earliest memory ever. My mother told me that this happened when I was 1.5 years old, but I distinctly remember this, and this is entitled Watching Grass Grow. Maudie and I lie on our bellies, tiny fists under tiny chins, staring at a rectangle of dirt outlined by pine stakes and kite string. Dad has planted grass seed off the side of the driveway. Says if we're patient, watch closely, we'll see it grow. Maudie whispers, I don't see anything. Expecting some magic, I yell, it's moving. But it's just an ant crawling over boulders of soil. We get up, dust ourselves off, go inside to watch cartoons. After April rain and sun, we have a front lawn, backyard too, tricycles, swing sets, swimming pools, and bedrooms of our own. As we get older, we wonder at how Dad is so content with a tract home. His glacier blue station wagon, a small plot of land he waters and grooms year after year. His family owned just what they could carry to Jerome and Tule Lake. He never mentioned that. The only grass he saw at the Santa Anita Assembly Center was in the middle of the racetrack near the horse stalls where his family slept. So in that poem, I mention Jerome and Tule Lake. Those are the 2 camps that my father and his family lived in for the years of the war, World War II. And the Santa Anita Assembly Center was actually the Santa Anita racetrack in the LA area. And that's where they gathered all the Japanese Americans into that one place so they could train them out to different parts of the country. And from there, my father went to Jerome and then eventually to Tule Lake. This next poem is about my father as well, and it's entitled Ritual. He drags a razor down his cheek, traces a pattern, 19 strokes, scrapes cream and stubble from drooping skin, like shoveling snow off uneven pavement. Sunk in his recliner, he conserves movement, pauses while sculpting chin, labors oxygen from bedroom air. Early 1940s, he got through teen years in Jerome and Tule Lake, learned to shave, smoke, and cuss. In camp, every other word was a swear word, he told me. I heard him say damn only once. He also quit smoking, finally, in 72, after inhaling 2 packs a day for 30 years. Shaving cream, face towel on the side table, basin of hot water in his lap. As ritual second, I hold the mirror, keep from saying good enough. After ghosting a touch-up, he exchanges track 2 for towel, refits the cannula under his nose. Oncologist at 3, car ride home, final look at his garden through the kitchen screen door. It's very difficult for me to think that my parents actually had a life before I came along. Um, but the more I think about what they endured in their lives, the more I appreciate them. Uh, this next poem is about my parents when they first got married, before my sister Maddie and I came along. And this is entitled The Hardest Part. The fire truck siren downstairs raided the air of my mother's dreams. She'd scream in her sleep, my father told me, even after we married. More than a decade past the Second World War. For him, American concentration camps. For her, the firebombing of Tokyo. They moved into a San Francisco apartment that rented to Japs. A one-bedroom walk-up above the Post Street fire station. They painted their bathroom black. It wasn't style then. Shelved books, unboxed a new rice cooker, watered a shrub of Japanese maple, potted for their future garden. When the station got a call in the middle of the night, the rumble of the overhead door crumbled into the wreck that was once her home. Swirling lights flashed ancient trees into flames through the thin silk curtains of her eyelids. No warning, no drill, no cover. My father stilled her body, his broad hand on her shoulder or hip, as they lay in the dark listening to the slowing of her breath. The hardest part of those nights, he said, was waiting, sometimes hours, for the truck and the men to come back. What's kept alive? She crunches her walker into the sea of pebbles surrounding the stepping stones, tells me, this bush with flowers is Japanese. That one is too, but different. I hover close behind, ready with an outstretched arm, as if to give a blessing. Pick that large weed near the lantern, by the roots, and throw it into the pail. My father planned and planted this garden 50 years ago, hidden behind the fence of their Santa Rosa tract home. But he's gone now. She hires a hand to rake leaves, prune branches once a month. Soon she'll be gone. I'll sell the house, return to Connecticut. A stranger will buy it, become caretaker of the garden, but won't know that from their San Francisco apartment, my father transported the Japanese maple, cradled in a small clay pot, the momiji now guarding the north corner, and that my mother chided him for bothering with a dying shrub. I would like to read 3 more poems for you. This next poem is entitled, it's my mother's name, Hama. It's a Japanese name, and it's spelled H-A-M-A. Hama. I ease a pen into the curl of mom's hand, ask her to sign a check. She sits on the edge of her bed, barely lucid, slowly forms H, A, a faint blue ballpoint cursive, a ripple, an echo, H, A, Again, her hand can't write what comes next. Her name is Japanese for beach. I say, it's okay. Help her lie back. Wonder as her eyes close if her memory washes ashore somewhere. Goat Rock, Doran Park, bright and blustery, where with bare feet, pant legs rolled up, she watches I don't toddle too far into the surf. This next poem is about my father again, and it's entitled Memorial. Straight as steel, hands on hips, Dad balances like a hood ornament on Irving Wasserman's head. Irv stands feet shoulder width apart, arms stretched out wide. A towel turban cushions his scalp. On the San Francisco Marina Green, sunbathers pay no attention to the two college gymnasts in tight swim trunks. The black and white image is attached to an email Irv sent this morning. He says he lost contact after my parents married 60 years ago, would like to reconnect. He doesn't know he's 7 years too late. No online obit, found me through my website. He calls my father remarkable, a word I never heard used to describe him. But yes, look, there he is, poised in the air, the husband who never cheated, the father who never struck me. And before I read my last poem, I just want to thank Leopoldo again for having me tonight. And thank you everyone for coming out. Sherri, that was wonderful again, powerful. And I thank you for your poems. This last poem is entitled Afternoon Infusion. She panics 3 hellos as if startled by the noise of an empty house. Calls from St. Joseph's. The nurses are slow to start her hydration. I'm at a bar. Stevie Nicks reverbs in my beer, lures me back to the edge of 17 in this town I left 30 years ago. I take her call outside, stand away from the smokers. Half truth, I'm at the mall. She slurs a request. Milk of magnesia. And that other thing she can't remember. But I remember when I was a boy. She told me about the mythical Japanese custom, ubasute. A grown son lifts his aged mother on his back, delivers her to a mountain, leaves her to die. I'll come pick you up after chemo, I say, and hang up, realizing she's already cradled by the mountain. The waft of cigarette smoke and hint of manure in Santa Rosa air usher me back into the restaurant. The hostess smiles, welcomes me. Clueless, I have come and gone. Thank you.
Since you all had poems about your mothers, and I happen to have one. It was written for her funeral, actually, in 2014. I had to have my nephew read it because I just couldn't get through it at the time, but I can completely feel compassion for anyone who's lost their parents. It's a difficult thing. This is called When No One's Looking. My parents were soulmates. That's a tough act to follow in relationships, believe me. When no one's looking, Sundays I think of my mother, once so beautiful, auburn-haired and curvy. My father's dream until the day he died in her arms. The cancer would not wait, and she could not follow until it was her time, but he'd be waiting. Now she sits alone, back cruelly curved by time and arthritis. By day, she does a dozen ordinary things with dignity, if not the grace she once possessed. At night, she reaches over, holds his hand when no one's looking. Here's the songs he wrote for her, played on his guitar. In her dreams, they are still lovers, driving the coast highway in their 1937 Chevy, and sometimes feels the fabric of the wings she sewed for a wrecked biplane. They rebuilt and flew together into 100 sunsets. She sees the sunset from her chair in the small living room where they used to sit together when the cancer would not wait, and he said she could not follow until it was her time. She is not afraid. She's sure he's waiting with his old guitar and flying gear, his easy smile. She smiles back, waves sometimes when no one's looking. Thank you.
And muted.
Okay, so I'm following the trend. I've got a mother poem too. Op-ed. When I was 10, my mother hit me on the head with a rolled up newspaper, then quickly hugged me. For days after, I wondered how she rolled up that paper so fast. Confused, I called it a guilt hug until my sister said, "Duh, you remind her of our father." My daughters warned friends, "Don't hug her first time, shake hands." My son, aloof at age 5, demanded to know why adults hugged him, his recoil going unnoticed by them. One Sunday in the New York Times op-ed section, I read, "Trauma travels through 13 generations." This morning after I walk my dog Lucy, we lie down on the tiled floor, the coldest part of my house, and I cry. Lucy licks away my tears. I don't know if it's an act of love or the taste of salt. This is what I do know. My mother was afraid of touch. Thank you.
Beautiful poems. I thought I changed what I was going to read since we're reading, and this is from Holy Magic, and it's in the voice of my father, Winslow Long. His daily walk. I take my evening walk, rainy streets, yards, and garden fences. My walking stick's a daughter's gift, for I refuse a cane. I name the plants, bleeding heart, blue-eyed grass. I make my way, then stop. A pile of feathers, black, a chick, the gape, a hungry pink. Above in hemlock branches, 2 crows flap and yell, fly up and down, distressed, their nestling, nestless. No way to help. I think of my lost child. No spring can salve the loss in 30 years gone by. The evenings changed, the baby birds too weak to fly. I tell the crows I mean no harm. I make my way through May, through streets that rain and rain. Whoever says that man's above a common bird has never lost a child. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think you'll be able to tell who I'm talking about once I get a ways down in this poem. It's called Approach Evening. As I walk along Aurora Avenue this mid-September at dinner hour, cars and trucks sail by on the asphalt river. I'm headed north to Finney Avenue to visit a legally blind woman. A block from her faded lemon-colored building, I hear the refrains of exotic songbirds across the street at Woodland Park Zoo. I go through the lobby where palsied fingers play a 1940s tune on the piano. When you're smiling, the whole world smiles at you. I take a faintly rattling elevator to the third floor and knock at the door to her room. As always, she greets me cheerfully, although she notices a storm cloud obscuring part of my face. She offers me some soup from dinner that she hasn't touched. It's made with cauliflower and other vegetables. Since it tastes like coat hangers and mothballs, I decline more than a spoonful. Then I read the New York Times to her, Maureen Dowd, Thomas Friedman, and the Arts and Leisure section. We talk memories of my father and my siblings. She worries about my brother and sister until it's 8 o'clock, the bedtime at this facility. As I leave, I glance through a window down the hall and see a gull fly from a white cross that spires a church 3 blocks away. Entering the dim twilight outside, I hear cars pass by like drafts of vanishing summer wind, and her favorite song in my head, all your life you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird fly into the light of a dark black night. Well, of course, that's about my mother. This is something I wrote a couple of months ago in a class, and she died in 2007, so it's been a while now.
This poem is going to be different. It's not going to be about my parents. I lost both of them, my father in 2000 and my mother in 2001. Okay, so anyway, this is called a verse on command. Where shall I find it? My train slowly wends its way from one life to another. 40 years left behind. Ulysses leaving an aged wife, forward to a son and family. Perhaps much remains, there is hope. Meanwhile, we pass water, boats, look into other people's homes. That's it.
All my poems are upstairs except for the one I plan to read, and it's not a tribute to anybody, but Aaron and Sherri, beautiful job, and everybody else. I just feel tremendously touched, and I'm sorry I'm not kind of going with the flow and going and doing something completely different. But thank you so much for sharing. Really touching and powerful and important work. I've just really enjoyed the spring. So after a dark winter and a lot of people in my life dying, I've been looking at the flowers. And this poem came out of that botany lesson. Gazing at a flower, did you let yourself land on yellow dusted stamen and travel a slender slope of filament to bloom's fragrant center? Did you journey further, burrow into stem, slip down its hollow to cool dirt and roots reach? Is this how you learned you were of the earth, connected to land and rain and sun? Did you inhale light and dark, touch tongue to dew? Is this how you learned to count, plucking petal after petal, loves me not? Or how you learned colors, periwinkle, violet, indigo, scarlet? Is this how you studied shapes and distance and how to dream? Did a bee teach you to hover, gather, lift and buzz, to fly afield and explore the bounty of blossoms? Thank you.